Welcome to Charity Therapy, the podcast where we explore the ups and downs of the nonprofit sector and answer your burning questions. I'm your host, Jess Birkin, owner of Birkin Law Office, and I'm excited you're here. Imagine hanging out with me and my super smart, funny nonprofit expert pals. You get to ask them anything about your nitty-gritty nonprofit life and get their wisdom for free. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just strapping on your nonprofit boots, we're here to share stories and remind you you're not alone on this journey. So get ready to join the conversation and bring me the tough questions. I ain't scared. Ready to rock? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to Charity Therapy. Today I am joined by my guest, Mark Bromberg. Mark is a business performance advisor with Insperity, where he helps nonprofits with their human resources and administrative needs. One of my favorite people to refer clients to when they need help. Mark, thank you for coming on.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Wild times. I feel like I have sent you lots of nonprofits lately, and there's lots of things happening in employment law and HR and for employers all the time. I'm really excited to have you here because I work with a lot of smaller organizations, especially, and they tend to get, let's say, creative with how they handle their human resources, and it's not always a great setup. And we had another guest recently who is like a human resources professional, and she was talking about the drawbacks of using PEOs. And I just was like, well, which PEO do you like? And she actually was like, none of them so far. And I was like, oh, that's a hot take. I need to invite Mark to bring in another perspective, right? So could you just, before we dig in, could you give us like just a quick overview of what even is a PEO, a professional employer organization?
So I guess the easiest analogy is most people are familiar with companies that come in and take care of all of the computers in your office. And we're sort of all in this mental state where we go, okay, there's cyber bad guys out there and the technology changes too quick. I can't keep up with it. So I'm going to hire someone else to handle that for me. We're the same thing only on the HR side of things. People they don't realize that labor laws and regulations are changing frequently as well. There are penalties, for non-compliance, and people are, human beings. And so if they're human beings, they make mistakes, and some of the mistakes can can cause issues with other people, can impact the business. And so how you're dealing with them needs to be very careful. You have to be very careful in that regard. So we take care of all of that for our clients. And then things like payroll and benefits are also relatively complex issues. You got to make sure you get them right. And we take, so taking all that off the plate allows our clients to focus on running their businesses, focus on strategic initiatives. And that's, we view ourselves not as necessarily as an HR company, but as a strategic lever to help our clients grow. And a big component of our lever is just HR strategies and HR tools.
Yeah, right on. Thank you for that. The piece about having benefits and having it done right is so key because, most organizations, they're not there because they want to do HR. They're there because they're excited about their mission, right? And it's like, how do we get this mission done? And all this personnel management stuff is getting in the way of mission work. So it's a good solution, I feel like, for certain organizations. All right, with that, are you ready for today's listener question?
I am.
All right, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm the executive director of a professional association. We have 7 full-time employees. We've had the same PEO for years, but I just got word that the company is dissolving. I need to look for a new PEO, but my board would also like me to consider other alternatives. Is there any general guidance around when it makes sense to have a PEO versus other forms of HR support? Well, there we go. This is a good one.
That is a good one. Let me start off with a line. It's not just a line, but it's what I tell anybody that I'm starting a conversation with. On paper, a PEO is the perfect business solution for every small to mid-market company in the country, if not the world. Paper is not the real world, and paper is not your actual operations. And so my job is to see, is there a match between that paper perfection and what you have? And if not, so be it. Let me direct you to, use my knowledge, my network to find the right path for you. So it might be that in that organization, they've reached a point, or there are things that are happening where handling things internally is a better resource than having a PEO. Usually for an organization of that size, however, having a PEO is the better solution because it's going to take care of, again, all this crap that they don't want to deal with, the compliance issues, risk issues associated with having employees, all the administrative needs, and then you've got payroll and benefits. So the board is right in their position to be asking the question. That's what they're supposed to do. And I applaud them for saying, hey, at this juncture, let's take a step back. Let's look and see what is the right path for us to take. I wouldn't just write off PEOs initially, nor would I write off going to doing it on your own initially. But I would use that opportunity to get more information. The PEO marketplace is very dynamic. There is money to be had here. And when there's money to be had, you get, financial people looking at it. So a lot of smaller PEOs are being kind of bought up by private equity, and that can have some serious impacts on things. And depending upon how things get timed and whatnot, that could impact you. There are PEOs like Insperity that are, way larger than private equity is going to want to go in and buy, because they're not going to be able to bundle it into anything that they can then sell. They're looking for smaller things to kind of create something of our size. So that's one of the things to be concerned about when you're looking is, who are you looking to partner with? You want somebody who has size and gravitas, who has skin in the game, who has experience. It's, they're dealing with your payroll, and you want to make sure that they have, if a mistake is made, they're going to be able to cover it, that they're a certified PEO, which is required at that point. So there are all of these little things that come into play, and whoever you're talking to as you're doing your due diligence should be honest enough with you to be able to answer all those questions and walk you down that path. Again, that path, I think that it makes so much sense for the small businesses. For us, is we take care of the things that our clients don't even know that they don't know. You're going to hire someone, they're remote, they're in a new city and state. Well, now you're dealing with all the withholding issues for that jurisdiction. That's brand new to you.
Yeah.
And
let me cut in there, because this organization, now they don't say where their 7 employees are, but I'm working with so many charities now since the pandemic that there are a lot of remote people, and they may be in 4 or 5 different states. And what this board may not realize is that when you have an employee in this, you've got one in Maryland, you've got one in Kentucky, you've got one in Washington, D.C., you've got one in Michigan. Well, you now are an employer in all of those states. I've even had clients try and say, like, we're a Minnesota company, so all of our employees, we report to Minnesota. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Because federally, the Department of Labor is like, your employee works in the state they live in, which means your organization has to go register to do business in that state, get an unemployment insurance account in that state, participate in whatever, their state mandated benefits, whether that's sick and safe time leave or family medical leave like Colorado has. So this board may be thinking, oh, hey, we're paying all this money to a PEO, but we could do it ourselves. But have you really gone through even just the time and effort that's going to be required for your team to manage doing business and complying with all of those rules and regulations? I mean, just as a small law firm owner, I've gone through this, and it's horrible. It's so horrible, because there's no way, like, I don't care what payroll software you use, you still manually have to go register, and you have to keep up all your things, and you have to pay attention. And that doesn't even touch that the employment laws are different in all of these places, and how you manage HR and how you accrue sick time. And then that's not even getting to, like you said, municipal rules, which is a big thing lately. And then you may have different employees in different states where maybe weed is legal here, but it's not there. And how do you deal with that? And it can be an absolute nightmare. And this listener doesn't give us more details, but like, those are things that you need to pay attention to, because it's not just, oh, we're paying a fee to this PEO. I want to circle back to the thing you said about VC money moving into the PEO space. I had no idea that was a thing that's happening. I mean, it makes perfect sense, But that's fascinating that private equity is coming in and acquiring PEO firms. And I don't know if folks have experienced this. Like, I was going to a dermatology clinic for a while where I was like, okay, clearly venture capital has moved into this practice because I'm talking to somebody through an iPad because it's at a call center somewhere else. And like, I felt like cattle moving through the stations at the slaughterhouse. Like, I was just like a cog in a
That's what you want at
wheel
the
of,
doctor's office. Great
yeah,
analogy.
right, exactly. It's like, I'm just like a cog in a wheel of their profits generating machine now rather than like a patient that's cared for. And I think that's a really key thing that I don't want to pass up on, that when people are considering a PEO, you should be looking beyond the brochure to figure out who actually owns this. Have they been acquired? Maybe do a little Googling to find out what you can, because that, I didn't even know that was a thing, and it makes perfect sense.
Even Googling, you're going to find information, and it's like anything else. Doctors hate Dr. Google because
Yeah.
people read something
Yeah.
and they think that they're an expert, and it's just not understanding it. And I won't use any names, but there's a pretty a decent sized PEO that was acquired, and they do pretty good work. Not as good as Insperity, but they do pretty good work. And it was also a certified PEO, and it came out a couple of weeks ago that they had lost their certification.
Oh,
Now, if you dig a little deeper, yes, they did lose their certification, but that is because the PEO rolled them up into one of the other PEOs that they had purchased. Now, it might have been that they liked the name of the other one better or
sure.
whatnot, but it's basically that the legal entity that was, PEO one ceased to exist. So, yes, it lost its certification.
It's telling that they didn't even consider that as an important factor when merging the two organizations, that they were like, whatever.
Well,
Who
it didn't
cares?
matter because they're basically moving the clients into the secondary one, which is also a certified PEO. But if you're looking at this, you might say, "Oh, well, it's not a certified PEO," and you may have during a time switch, it might be that you got people in the field who are saying, I'm representing PEO XYZ," and you go and look them up. It's like, "Oh, well, you just lost your certification." When the people who are on the feet on the street may not be getting all of the information, the timely information, because it's look, until things are official, we're not making a big deal, we're not doing anything, so they're sort of at a loss. So even when you're doing your research, it can be a little difficult.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason when you're dealing with or working with larger entities, the information is going to be a lot more stable, particularly those that are filing reports on a quarterly basis to Wall Street, and because you can't really hide things there.
Right. Right. Another, just relevant to the doing your research before selecting, I've definitely had clients where their mission area is maybe like attractive to, it's political. I'm thinking like abortion clinics, women's reproductive health, trans rights, whatever, like where they are attracting sort of like anti people. And
Mhm.
these clients are very concerned about data privacy and making sure that the providers that they're working with kind of have their back, right? And so that's something too, just to think about if you're working with vulnerable populations or you are concerned about data breaches or people getting access to your inside, the name and address of where all of your employees live. That's something you want to bring up with your PEO when you're like thinking through how are you going to work together? What happens if you get a request for information? Like, there are some mission areas where really having a good relationship and not having it be like all we care about is the profit margin and reporting back to our shareholders. These things matter to a lot of nonprofits.
Oh, yeah. And so one of the things about Insperity is we operate in a true co-employment business model. So as far as the government is concerned, every one of our clients' employees actually has, I refer to it as you're a traditional household. You got two parents and then kids. And the parents divide the work. Someone cooks dinner, someone cleans, and while whoever's cooking, the other parent is helping with the homework, and then while the other one's cleaning, the other parent helps with bathe the kids, and you sort of divide to conquer kind of thing. It's the same thing with us. We co-employ with our clients. So they're taking care of all of the issues surrounding who to hire, what the jobs are, how much to pay, who to promote, who to train, who to fire, all the administrative stuff. We'll consult on it and help them, but the decisions are theirs. It's their business, their organization. We take care of the administrative and compliant type of things, executing payroll, paying the taxes, etc. So as a result, every one of our clients, one, they're also on the same benefit plan that I'm on. There's no difference. So our pool is about 400,000 people, and they're viewed as, your office came on, you would be viewed as an Insperity employee the same way I am. So we really protect that data because it's not like a request of we want the information for client X, and client X is a closed kind of thing. You're part of Insperity, and that there are lawyers who are looking to protect that, and someone's going to have to show up with a really good court order and a reason, because we're not going to be looking to give out information.
Yeah, love that. It just occurs to me too, like so many clients, you're talking about payroll and all the reporting and everything. So many clients I have talked to over the years, it's like, they might be doing everything in a sense. Their side of the co-parenting is going well. Like their employees are happy, everyone's getting along, whatever. But so often, a lot of that other side is neglected, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they're not keeping all of the records. Maybe they're not documenting when somebody does have a problem, and they should be documenting those things, because it could spiral into something bigger later. Maybe they're personally signing payroll checks. Maybe their bookkeeper is in charge of sending in the employer tax 941 forms. Like so many times I talk to people who are like, but we just have 5 employees. Like, it's just like, we don't need all that. And I'm like, here's the thing, guys. It doesn't matter if you have 3 or 300, you have to comply with all the rules. And
Right.
you might be really great at that one side of things where you're like doing the like day-to-day pep talks and management and getting the best performance out of people. But if the other side of the coin isn't there, it can really cause problems because you're on the hook.
Right, and people kind of forget about certain aspects, and I don't believe this happens in the not-for-profit space. But let's say, you had a really great fundraising year, and you want to give everyone on your staff a $5,000 bonus at the end of the year. Well, depending upon how you do that, it's going to impact their salary. And one, could be that your payroll provider is going to charge extra for running an additional pay run. Your workers' comp is going to get reallocated at the end of the year. It's going to get trued up because your wages changed. There's all these little things that just start taking time away from what you really want to do. You didn't open your business to deal with this. You didn't form a not-for-profit to deal with this. And there are different solutions for that. I am involved with a not-for-profit. It was a husband and wife that they had one child. The child tragically passed away from brain cancer. And they started raising money to fund brain cancer research. And they got to a size where they realized this has become a thing. And they had 2 choices. Either they hire someone to run it, or they go to an association management company.
Yep.
And they opted to go to the association management company, and they've grown, it's now raising like 1.5 million a year. They're doing phenomenal
incredible
stuff.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law was looking at the financial returns and was like, their administrative expenses are through the roof. I'm like, yeah, because they're paying someone to do this. And so there's a third party who's taking money out of this. But if that third party wasn't there, this would be a charity raising $150,000. Now they're raising 1.5. They're able to give away 1.3. That's a net benefit.
Yeah.
So it worked for them because now the husband and wife are still basically like running things, but there's no staff, there's no nothing. They just the passion for which they
focus on the
start
fundraising, which is why they got involved in this. They didn't they weren't inspired by their child's tragic death to look at payroll tax forms or whatever,
Exactly.
whatever it is. It's not why people are excited about the mission. And that's why I think a lot of times it gets neglected, the kind of do is the bare minimum. That sounds rude, but I don't mean it that way. It's just, I know it's not the exciting part. Right. And so it tends to get sort of left out.
Right. And then what ends up happening is that it comes back to bite you at some point in the future. And I was listening to some of your podcasts, and people like discovering it's like, I joined the board and I was asking about some of the forms. They hadn't filed
Right.
their forms in 5 years. And so, like, what do they do? And like, it's no one wants to do that work.
Right.
That's why we exist.
Exactly.
You didn't go start anything to become an employer. You did it to execute your mission, your desire, your dreams. So leave that crap, as I call it, to us. We'll take care of it for you.
I love that. Okay. So I feel like we have some really good takeaways here, and I want to kind of like wrap them up, and let's see if I hit everything that you think we hit. So, first of all, you don't know what you don't know. And I know this is absolutely true for me, and I'm sure it's true for you. Mistakes can be expensive for your nonprofit, both in your relationships with your people and expensive to your organization's financial resources. And then, secondly, to counter my good friend, the HR pro, PEOs are still a great way to get your people benefits and have it done right, because sometimes you can't access those things on your own. And I think that's an incredible resource for a lot of nonprofits to be competitive in the marketplace of
Can I
employees.
interject one thing
Yeah.
on that? It's also a belief that if you've got an HR pro, you don't need a PEO, and the PEOs don't want to work with HR pros. And nothing can be further from the truth. Having a real HR pro as part of the core team is the greatest benefit, because now you've got somebody who's the quarterback internally,
Yes.
and the PEO basically becomes the entire rest of the team to execute on the strategy that individual is coming up with. And
100%.
so now they've got advisors, and then they got people, and they have foot soldiers, and that's a critical thing to remember.
Yeah. So let's add that in there in the list, that fractional HR or full-time HR, but fractional HR and a PEO is a winning combination.
Yep.
And then the big one, choose wisely. Yes, people have bad experiences with PEOs. PEOs are on the radar of private equity. There are bad experiences out there. You need to choose wisely. And so when you're choosing, look and make sure they're certified. Look and see if they have that true co-employer model where you are dividing the labor like parents with the kids. Find out, if you can, whether they've been absorbed by private equity and are just trying to squeeze every last cent out of you and skip the customer service. And then I think I like your last sort of nugget, which was like, leave the crap for us to deal with. Ultimately, nonprofits, especially smaller nonprofits, but even mid-sized ones with big staff, this is not why you exist. You don't exist to do all these administrative things, and it's not what anybody's excited about. So leave the crap for people like Mark. Give Mark your crap. Okay. Anything that you think we missed?
Anything else that I think we've missed? No, not really. Do your due diligence. Actually, no, there is one thing: is you want to make sure that it's a culture fit. If like anything else, it's there's personalities. You're going to be engaged with the people. Don't just talk to the person who's trying to sell you on the service.
Yeah.
Ask to speak to people on the service team. They're the ones who are going to be taking care of you long term anyway. Ask to speak to clients.
Yep.
Don't be alarmed if they look at you and say that'll be the last step, because you want to protect people's time. They're not a client to be a reference 24 hours a day.
Right.
But as a final step, that's a perfectly appropriate thing to ask. So, and again, it just do your due diligence.
Yeah. I love that.
Like with anything else.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. It's a big decision. Take it seriously. Okay.
Yep.
Mark, thank you so much for joining me for Point Counterpoint on PEOs. If folks would like to connect with you online, where can they find you on the interwebs?
On the interwebs. So, one, I'm on LinkedIn. That's an easy place that anyone, if you don't remember any of the other details, they can find me at mark.bromberg@insperity.com. That's the other place. And happy to answer any questions that people have.
Awesome. Well, folks, you heard it here first. Mark's email is available to you now. If you enjoyed this episode, look, do me a huge favor. Share it with a friend. If you are part of a nonprofit that you know, like their kind of employment compliance is maybe a little out of whack, make a recommendation. Have them consider a PEO and share this episode with them. Leave us a rating, a comment on your podcast app. It really does help people find the show. And if you have a question or a story to share, I would love to hear from you. Send me a note online at charitytherapy.show. And thanks as always for listening.